So I remember there being a time in my life when I would roll over in the mornings to the sound of my alarm clock going off. And instead of getting up out of the bed, I would just sit there with this just overwhelming and paralyzing anxiety just sitting there on my chest. And then I would find myself beginning to take a mental inventory of the day ahead of me and just instantly feel overcome with dread and irritability. And this actually became a constant experience for me for years and years. And I would try so hard to fight through those feelings and just make myself get out of the bed and go to work. And most mornings I would end up winning the battle, and some others I wouldn't. But regardless of how it went, it was just a miserable feeling that I knew had to stop. And it wasn't until I sat down and just took an honest look at my life that I began to identify the cause of the feelings that I was having. I realized that I was entertaining so much freaking negativity in my head and just always expecting the worst to happen. And it was just as if I was in a constant state of just bracing myself for something bad to happen. That's when I realized that I was just in a consistent state of rumination. I would just constantly find my mind running and thinking about how I was perceived by other people or different ways that I had made a mistake in my life. And it was just constantly think so much negativity and just discouraging things about myself. And I wanted a shift so badly. I just wanted to instantly start feeling better, but it was like the more I tried to force good feelings, the more I just felt like I was climbing an uphill battle that I just could not win. So that's when I came across certain teachers like Abraham Hicks, Bob Proctor, Wayne Dyer, and a few others out there. And I started to realize that the current state that I was in was something that I was actually perpetuating by putting so much pressure on myself just to be perfect. Like I was just trying so hard to be perfect at everything that I was literally making myself neurotic. And then I also started to come across the work of Carl Jung and his topic of the shadow and the unconscious mind and the psyche. And I began to turn everything in my life around into some sort of symbology. And that's when things started to begin to click for me. It didn't all happen at once, but it was like very small, imperceptible ways that I began to notice things. I began to practice tiny mindset shifts every single day. And not to force positivity, but to just observe my inner world with just curiosity and having less judgment. And so instead of waking up and immediately bracing myself for the worst, I started just asking myself gentle questions like, what if today actually turns out better than I expect? Or what can I give to myself this morning before I give it to the world? And these weren't like these grand special affirmations or these unrealistic declarations. They were just like these little small openings that I began to create, micro shifts. And then slowly these small openings became just a doorway to a new way of being. And as I continued to deepen this exploration and started reading Carl Jung's work, especially his ideas around the shadow self and the unconscious, that was a game changer because I started to realize that so many of my negative thoughts weren't just random. They were repressed parts of myself trying to speak. They were parts that I had pushed away or rejected and just decided that they were unworthy. And Carl Jung's perspective helped me to stop seeing those inner voices as an enemy and just begin to start seeing them instead as a messenger. And so I stopped resisting my inner darkness and started to integrate it and then learn to sit with it, listen to it, and try to understand what it was trying to teach me. And that's when I began to see how real transformation happens. And it doesn't happen by suppressing your pain, but actually by turning towards it with a sense of compassion. And then over time, I became less focused on having to fix myself, and I became more interested in trying to understand myself. And I think that's where things really begin to happen. And it was like the more that I embraced symbolic languages of my thoughts and emotions and paid more attention to my dreams and the symbology that they were expressing, the more empowered I felt to work with them instead of against them. Because I learned that I wasn't broken. I was just buried under layers of fear, expectation, and pressure. And with every single micro mindset shift, I was slowly remembering who I really was underneath everything. So this process taught me that healing isn't always loud or super apparent or visible or obvious. And sometimes it can be just as quiet as choosing not to believe the same old thought. Sometimes just letting yourself cry without labeling it as weakness or something negative, or sometimes just sitting still, even if it's just for 5 minutes, and saying, I'm here, I exist, and that's enough for now. And these micro shifts began to rewire how not only I saw the world, but how I saw myself and other people as well. And I began to realize that so much of my suffering came from the belief that I was supposed to be someone else, someone who had accomplished more, someone who was more perfect, someone more confident. But the truth is that I was never meant to be anybody else but me. And the more that I surrendered to that truth, the more peace that I found within myself. Because there's a very famous Carl Jung quote that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And that quote stuck with me. It was so powerful to me because I had spent so long feeling like life was just happening to me and never realizing that I was actually unconsciously creating the pain that I was trying to avoid. But once I started to just gently bring awareness to the patterns that were there, to my self-talk, to the reactions that I had and my beliefs, it helped me to reclaim my power. And it wasn't in a forceful way, but it was more of a quiet, grounded way. So it wasn't like I was just surviving anymore. I was actually becoming conscious. And that really changed everything for me. Now, granted, I still have low days. I still get anxious sometimes and overthink, and I'll even doubt myself sometimes. But I meet those parts of me just with a new level of curiosity and even grace. And I just remind myself that healing isn't a destination. It's more like a relationship, one that deepens every time you choose presence over perfection, or compassion over control, and just get curious instead of being critical. And that to me is the real power of choosing micro mindset shifts, because it may not look like a lot from the outside, but they can actually reshape your entire inner world. And when your inner world changes, your outer world has no choice but to follow. So thank you so much for tuning into this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.